So I wanted to make a video about like, do I believe in God or not, or what are my thoughts on God? Um, and I think like God is like the term is like kind of vague, like different people like think of God in different ways. Like um, there was a I think it was a physicist, Spinoza. There's something called the God of Spinoza, which is the idea that the whole universe is God, right? um, which sounds a little silly, but I think that there's like something to the idea. Um, I tend to think God does exist. Um, so I just want to throw that out there. I'm gonna bounce around a little bit with this topic, so I apologize if it seems like I'm rambling, but I don't know how else to make these videos that don't make it sound like I'm rambling. It's I don't know. I think well, I think the universe. Um, yeah, I do believe in God. Um, uh, and I think that there's like a scientific basis to believe in God too. There's like this one quote, I can't remember exactly. Uh, there's something along the lines of like, when you first start getting the science or whatever, or like philosophy, it kind of leads you to the idea that God doesn't exist. And then if you look at science or philosophy, like more and more and more, it starts to, go back to the idea that God does exist. And so I tend to believe that God does exist, but I think it's impossible to know, you know? But I think that the universe is a vast place, right? Like our observable universe is enormous, right? And I think that there's really good reason to believe that the universe is much, much bigger than what we think of as our observable universe. So I think that given how big the universe is, and given how long, you know, time can go on for, I think that it's only probable that some like highly intelligent being comes to exist and has some sort of say over what eventually happens to humans here on Earth, because um, I feel like it's like um, I think that I think that I think that if God doesn't exist, then this world becomes a very scary place that's almost like not worth living in, you know? And so I think that in order for like us to like humans to like exist and survive, and I think like on like a personal level, on like an individual level, I think that religion or like a belief in God is like kind of fundamental, because I think that a godless society, like what I'd say I don't want to say we live in a godless society, but we live in a society where religion takes like it takes like it's like a backseat driver. It's not really like, it's just kind of there. It's not really like doing a whole lot, but it's kind of just in the background. Whereas if you go to a lot of countries, you go to most countries in the world, religion's like a more, and like historically speaking, religion's kind of a more uh, important part of life, And I think that one thing that American society gets wrong is that they don't place enough importance or value on religion. And I think that that is why, we have a society that's like so morally corrupt, right? Because I think that there's really good reasons to behave morally besides, God. But I think that if it's as simple as if you do good things happen to you. If you do bad things happen to you. I think that, like on a societal level, it requires like that belief for society to function, because otherwise what happens is you have, I don't know, like what you have now, like you just have complete moral corruption because people think that they're just going to die and that, they can do whatever they want and nothing bad's going to happen. And I think that if we had a society that was much more religious, that placed much more like emphasis on, belief in the afterlife and things like this, then we would have a more functional society. And I think that God most likely does exist. But I think it's impossible to know, but I think that it's almost like I feel like we live in like a void of existence, right? Like we live in the most like desolate, inhospitable, environment you could possibly imagine. You could imagine a little bit worse, but like in terms of like the existential aspect of it, right? Like um like we I feel like if God doesn't see, I think that what I think the vastness of the universe argument is kind of hard to argue with, but I think that it's impossible to know whether God exists or not. But I think the vastness of the universe argument is the hardest argument to argue with, right? Because but I also think that there's a fine tuning argument. People talk about how the universe seems oddly fine tuned for human life. I mean, I think that if you give, how large the universe is, the fine tuning argument loses a little bit of value. But I think that humans can become godlike eventually. I think that humans can evolve to the point where they can become more like the God described in, the Bible than the characters in the Bible themselves, right? Because I think as time goes on, humans get more and more developed, more advanced. There's all these technologies kind of knocking on our door right now. There's, they have Neuralink now, which they're trying to make people, as smart as the smartest supercomputers with. There's all these these people are in the way, though, is the thing, that there's a lot of emerging technologies that could easily be developed in a very short amount of time if these people weren't in the way. But it becomes so political and chaotic and awful with them, and they fight everything every step of the way. And so, it's like we live 100 years in the past in terms of technology, when really where the world is at technologically is like 100 years ahead of where you currently think, or something like that. Um, I'm rambling, but I guess my point is that I think that if humanity were to keep going like this and we don't go extinct, right, we'll eventually progress to the point where this argument about how we talk about how, and I talk about the vastness of the universe argument. The universe is so vast that, uh, some highly intelligent being is probably out there already, right? Just because the universe has been around for, well, there's the Big Bang, but you know, there's probably matter outside of the Big Bang. The Big Bang is probably not the entire universe, but we don't know for sure, but probably not. But um, so I think you could take the vastness of the universe argument, right? We don't even need that, right? We could just say that humans are going to evolve to the point where we will eventually become, godlike, right? And so as long as humanity doesn't go extinct, the whole idea of, like, I feel like eventually humans will have the technology to bring the dead back to life, and humans will have the technology to, cure all the sick and make people live forever and create, a heavenly place for everyone to live in, right? If humans just keep evolving as they're evolving, it's like we're gonna go to heaven regardless, right? Because if we could just keep evolving to where we have the most sophisticated technologies ever, in the future, then it's like we can just make heaven here, and you don't actually need any sort of supernatural belief. But I do think that like a creator does exist. I do think a creator does exist, but I think that's an impossible question to like totally answer fully. You know what I mean? But I would say most likely a creator does exist, and I think that even if a creator doesn't exist, we better hope a creator does exist because otherwise the world's a real like morbid place. So um, that's kind of my thoughts.